Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired engineer finds luxury homes mysteriously rising on his remote farmland, he doesn't call the cops. He loads his drone, sharpens his shovel, and starts documenting a war. This isn't just a property dispute, it's a rural rebellion, and Grayson Crowell doesn't lose on his own land. I never liked surprises. Not the birthday kind, not the lottery kind, and certainly not the kind that came with gold-embossed envelopes shoved into my rusted mailbox like they own the damn thing. I stood there on my gravel driveway that morning, sun still yawning over the eastern tree line, a cup of black coffee in one hand, and a letter in the other, one that smelled like perfume, plastic, and HOA overreach. Golden Mesa Village Homeowners Association cordially invites you. It began. I didn't get much further before I folded the thing back up like a bad joke and tossed it into the fire barrel next to the barn. The crows watched in silence. Smart birds. They knew better than to invite me to anything. I'm Grayson Crowell, 61, retired Marine engineer, full-time landowner, part-time pessimist. This land, 12,000 acres of red dirt, pecan trees, cattle runs, and hard-earned independence, wasn't a hobby farm. It was a living, a fortress, and the last piece of my family still rooted in this part of northern Oklahoma. My father broke his back fencing this land by hand. My grandfather worked it with mules before tractors. You don't just hand that legacy over to a bunch of vinyl-siding yuppies playing suburbia in the sticks. But apparently someone nearby didn't get the memo. Golden Mesa Village had sprung up like a boil on the edge of my west pasture, full of synthetic smiles and matching solar mailboxes. Their HOA president, Karen Bloom, had the kind of teeth-whitened ambition that made your skin itch. She was, according to her glossy newsletter, committed to uniting the community through aesthetic cohesion and mutually beneficial stewardship. In plain English, that meant she didn't like the look of my 60-year-old corrugated steel barn ruining the view from her ornamental fountain. A week after the invitation went up in smoke, I received another letter. This one was stiffer, angrier. The HOA had observed repeated tractor activity along County Line Road without prior scheduling. They respectfully requested that all heavy agricultural transport be routed through alternative corridors during peak community tranquility hours. I read that part out loud to my cattle just to hear how stupid it sounded. Next came a pamphlet titled Modern Rural Living, Guidelines for a Harmonious Future, which included a suggestion that I consider repainting the barn in a more HOA-compliant palette. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch swing. The barn was rust red, because that's what steel does when it survives 50 winters and 49 summers. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a badge of damn honor. Then one Tuesday, she showed up in person. I was cleaning the blades on my combine when I heard the click of heels. Heels! On gravel. I turned and saw her striding down my driveway like she had a title deed in her purse. Blonde bob, tennis visor, and a clipboard clutched to her chest like it was the Holy Scripture. "Mr. Crowell," she asked, with a smile like a butter knife. "That's me," I said, not getting up. Karen Bloom, president of the Golden Mesa HOA. I just wanted to drop by personally and extend an invitation to our monthly community roundtable. "Ma'am, I don't do roundtables. I'm a rectangle kind of guy." She chuckled, not getting the joke. "We're working on creating a more unified sense of neighborhood stewardship, especially among adjacent landowners. We've had a few concerns raised about your activities." "Such as?" "Well," she said, glancing at her clipboard, "tractor traffic during the dinner hour, visible livestock from the western trail, and the large metal structure by your east fence line." "You mean my barn?" She gave a tight smile. "Let's call it a structure." "Let's not." She hesitated. "I think if we just sat down and discussed our shared goals—" I cut her off with a smile of my own. "Ma'am, I think the best thing you can do for our shared goals is keep your rules behind your fence. I'm not part of your development. My land isn't for sale, and my cows don't take dinner meetings." She blinked. I could almost see her loading the next round into her mental chamber. "Well, I suppose I should inform you that the HOA board may explore further options for promoting community integrity." "You do what you need to do," I said, standing slowly and brushing dust off my overalls. "And I'll do what I need to. Now, if you'll excuse me, the only round table I'll be seeing today is the steering wheel on that John Deere over there." Karen turned without another word, storming off down the driveway like she expected the gravel to apologize for existing. I watched her go, wondering how long it would take her to try something dumber than a pamphlet. I had a feeling she'd get creative. I just didn't know how creative. It started with detours. At first, I chalked it up to dumb luck. Maybe a detour sign had been set up wrong. Maybe someone at the depot couldn't read a map. But when the same fertilizer shipment got rerouted for the second time in 2 weeks, I stopped believing in coincidence. The driver, a kid named Ray, who'd hauled for me every season since his dad retired, scratched the back of his neck and said, "Some lady flagged us down up near Mesa Trail, claimed there were new traffic rules." Handed me a printout and told me to take the longer loop around the backside. He shrugged, said it was from county. I looked at the paper he gave me. No county seal, no signatures. Just a sleek header that read, Golden Mesa Village Homeowners Association Agricultural Access Update. I squinted at it. The language was slippery, legal sounding, but hollow. Phrases like harmonization of logistics corridors and minimization of visual disruption. I didn't say much at the time, just thanked Ray and told him to ignore any lady with a clipboard who didn't own the road under her feet. But inside, I was already calculating. I made a few calls. County roads, sheriff's department, zoning office. Nobody had issued any detour orders. Nobody even knew what the hell a logistics harmonization zone was. It was all HOA fiction. A few days later, my seed shipment got delayed. Not late exactly, just way off course. Driver said he was told to wait for clearance from neighborhood security. I asked him who told him that. He said, some guy in a reflective vest with a HOA badge. Looked official. I nearly choked on my coffee. Neighborhood security. On a dirt road that ran through cattle gates and wheat fields. I started checking things more carefully. I took my ATV and did a slow circuit of the western edge near Golden Mesa, camera mounted on the handlebars, GPS running the whole way. I found markers, bright pink flagging tape wrapped around stakes pounded into the soil about 20 feet inside my fence line, not surveyor's stakes. These were newer, cheaper, flimsier, someone marking imaginary territory. I didn't touch them, just logged the locations and took photos. There were a dozen at first. Then I found more, some laid out in a curve, like a road or driveway was being planned. Another stretch had flattened brush, and I spotted survey chalk on the dirt. It was subtle, but deliberate. That night, I reviewed my security feeds. I'd had cameras up along most of the perimeter since the copper thefts a few years back. On the southern feed, I caught something interesting. A white SUV stopping just past the fence, and 2 men getting out with clipboards. They took notes, pointed, walked 10 feet in, then left. I zoomed in. One of them wore a vest with the Golden Mesa HOA logo. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. Next morning, I got an email. Not from the HOA. This one was from one of my suppliers. Subject line, urgent, routing and coordination policy. The body read, Hi, Mr. Crowell. We've been contacted by a representative from Golden Mesa Village who claims to coordinate logistics in your area. They stated that future deliveries to your farm should be pre-cleared through their HOA office to avoid conflicts. Just checking if this is accurate. Pete. I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. Pre-cleared? Conflicts. They were trying to wrap their fingers around my supply lines like a python. They wanted to pressure my vendors into compliance by making it sound official, but it wasn't official. It was pure HOA fiction, dressed up like law. I replied to Pete with 2 words, absolutely not. After that, I started keeping a ledger, not for my crops, not for livestock, but for this little war. A record of every letter, every rerouted shipment, every fake sign, every stake I found in the soil. I built a folder labeled Golden Meddlers. The thing grew by the day. One evening, just as I was feeding the dogs, I saw a drone buzzing near the fence line. Low, slow, deliberate. It hovered over the southern paddock for a full minute before veering back toward the subdivision. I watched it go, jaw clenched. HOA recon, no doubt. The next day, I got another pamphlet in the mail. This one had the nerve to suggest community-friendly alternatives to traditional agriculture and included a proposed plan to rezone unused land into recreational green space for neighboring families. I nearly lit it on fire in my hands. Unused land. That unused land was my hay reserve, ready to be cut. Their plan was less about green space and more about creeping borders. That night, I went out and planted a new post at the southwest corner, extra tall, painted bright red. On it, I nailed a sign, Private property. Not for negotiation. Not for discussion. I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last one I'd need. The call came just after dawn, and it wasn't the kind of call you ignore. I was out in the tool shed replacing a busted fuel line on the auger when my phone buzzed on the workbench. Caller ID said Bobby Wilson. Bobby was a rancher, a stubborn bastard, and one of the only neighbors I halfway trusted. He lived about a mile and a half southeast of the new HOA border, just close enough to hear the hum of their decorative waterfall and far enough to avoid their barbecues. Grayson, he said, voice low and unsure. You got something going on out by the pecan grove? My hands froze. Number why? Well, I was out early with the dogs, and I saw some construction equipment moving around near the edge of your south fence. Thought maybe it was one of your crews. 3 little cabins, looks like. Real new. Concrete pads, frames, even plumbing going in. I didn't say anything for a second. My eyes locked on the corner of the shed wall, but my mind was already halfway across the property. I didn't have any active projects going in that quadrant. Hadn't for years. It was an isolated slice of land tucked behind a patch of wild elm, mostly used for seasonal grazing and squirrel hunting. And I hadn't authorized a damn thing to be built there. Bobby, I said real calm, how many people you see? Hard to say. Maybe 8 or 10. Mixed group. Looked organized. Some kind of crew. Not randoms. I hung up without saying goodbye. Bobby would understand. I took the truck, not the ATV, because I didn't want to arrive quietly. The diesel growl of my old Dodge rolling through the field would announce me loud and clear. I bounced through the pasture, skirted the stream, and climbed the low ridge overlooking the disputed edge of my land. That's when I saw them. 3 structures, rectangular, about 25 by 30 feet each, freshly framed and standing proud like they belonged there. Foundation poured, framing finished, tarps over roofing beams. There was a porta-john parked at the end of a gravel access lane and a small trailer that looked like a site office. A pair of workers were unloading PVC piping from a flatbed. Another was marking something on a clipboard. All of them were wearing matching safety vests, bright green with a tiny logo I recognized even from this distance. Golden Mesa Village, HOA. My hands curled into fists on the steering wheel, but I didn't step out yet. Not today. I backed the truck up, slowly, quietly. I didn't want them knowing I'd seen them yet. Instead, I drove back to the house, parked in the barn, went inside, and opened my safe. Inside were 2 things I hadn't touched in a while, my FAA-certified drone and a laminated parcel map of my entire property, GPS verified, notarized, and filed with the county a decade ago. Every inch of that land, from the rusty fence post by the cattle pond to the eastern tip of the dry creek, was mine. And those little homes. They were a good 60 yards inside my southern property line. I booted up the drone and launched it just before sunset. I let it glide over the ridge at a high arc, camera angled low, snapping stills every 2 seconds. I didn't fly directly over the builds, just skirted them like a curious bird. No reason to spook the crew. Let them build. Let them pour their money into every nail and plank. Let them sink deep into their little illusion. The drone came back with clean footage, lot markers staked into my soil, power cables strung from a junction box dug into the slope, and one of the cabins already hooked up to a temporary water line snaked in from the Golden Mesa side. No permits, no calls, no requests, just quiet, deliberate occupation. I cataloged everything, date, coordinates, weather conditions. I put it all in a folder labeled HOATRESPASSACTIVE. Then I called my lawyer. Sandra Martinez was the kind of attorney that HOA nightmares were made of, short, sharp, and armed with a legal mind like a bear trap. I'd worked with her before during a dispute with a neighboring developer who tried to build a drainage ditch through my north field. He now sold tires in Tulsa. After explaining the situation, Sandra exhaled sharply. They built what now? 3 houses, I said. Framed, piped, HOA, vests everywhere. Do you have proof? I sent her everything. 10 minutes later, she called back. Sit on it, she said. Don't say a word to them. Don't touch the buildings. Let them finish. Why? Because when we nail them, we'll bury them in concrete, plumbing, and trespass charges. Every dollar they spend is a nail in their own coffin. If you act now, they'll spin it as a misunderstanding. Let them commit. I hung up, poured myself a whiskey, and watched the drone footage on a loop. The arrogance of it all, the belief that a man wouldn't notice strangers driving rebar into his earth. That 12,000 acres meant 12,000 blind spots. Karen must have thought this was some neglected corner of forgotten land. She didn't understand. There isn't a blade of grass on this farm I haven't cursed at or walked over. She'd built on my dirt, and she thought I wouldn't see. Let her think that. I had time, and she had no idea how deep I'd let her dig. The thing about letting someone hang themselves is you have to be patient enough to hand them more rope. And, believe me, Karen was tugging on that rope like it came with a prize at the end. Over the next 6 weeks, I watched as those 3 little homes went from skeletons to full-blown mockeries of jurisdiction. Roofs were sealed with shiny asphalt shingles. Front doors were painted a soft, HOA-approved beige. And decks, yes, damn decks, were installed facing the fields, as if the new homeowners would be sipping Chardonnay and admiring the sunset over my hay. Ballas. It was obscene, and yet I didn't lift a finger, not once. I kept walking the fence line like usual, fixing a busted gate here, rerouting a water line there, all while the construction crew carried on like they owned the ground beneath them. I even waved once when a worker looked up. He waved back. I wasn't just biding time, I was collecting everything. Sandra had put me in touch with a private aerial surveyor who ran a monthly pass over the county for agricultural assessments. I paid him to do a special flyover just for me. High-res imaging, time-stamped and geolocated, showing day-by-day progression of the illegal structures. Meanwhile, I went full overkill on documentation. Motion-triggered trail cams pointed at the gravel lane they'd carved through my soil, field mics to catch vehicle activity, and game cameras set to burst mode along the south tree line. Every nail they hammered went into my case file. And still, not a word from Karen. Not a letter. Not a call, not a peep from the HOA. It was like they thought they were operating in a vacuum, and I was just a dumb old farmer too busy chasing cows to notice them building a suburb in my backyard. But what really got me, what truly lit the fuse, was the flyer. It showed up one afternoon tucked inside my mailbox, like it had just wandered in on its own. Glossy paper, smiling stock photo families, and bold obnoxious lettering at the top. Golden Mesa South. Limited homes available now. The damn flyer had my trees in the background. They'd used my own property, my land, as marketing material. I stared at the thing for a long while. It even had pricing information. Karen or someone on her board had already begun selling these units. Open house next weekend. RSVP online. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I drove straight down to the county assessor's office and requested every record, filing, and permit application submitted by Golden Mesa Village in the past year. I got a sleepy clerk named Mel to pull the digital forms. As she scrolled, I saw them. 3 applications marked in progress, filed under the HOA's legal entity, citing proposed community expansion onto adjacent parcels, pending cooperation. I asked her, real calm, if anything had been approved. She checked. Nope, these were submitted months ago. Nothing stamped, no follow-up. Any permits issued? Not for those lots. They're still listed under Crowell Agriculture Holdings, LLC. Thanks, Mel. She blinked. Wait, Crowell. But I was already walking out the door. That weekend, the open house happened. I stayed well back, parked under a line of cottonwoods on the ridge, and watched through binoculars. There were at least a dozen cars, maybe more. People in polo shirts and sun hats walked around like they were touring a model home, chatting with someone I could only assume was a real estate agent in a cheap blazer. They had balloons. Balloons. One of the cabins had a welcome mat. Another had patio furniture set up, as if it was already someone's weekend escape. I snapped photos of everything. Sandra was going to have a field day. But the best moment came when I spotted Karen herself, standing proudly on the deck of the middle house, arms crossed, smiling like a queen surveying her kingdom. She pointed at something in the distance and said something to a couple standing next to her. They nodded, all impressed. I followed her finger. She was pointing at my barn. I could only imagine the pitch. Rustic charm, authentic rural atmosphere, heritage farming district, all within walking distance of suburban amenities. She was selling a dream built on stolen dirt. That night, I drove down to the fence line myself, brought a flashlight, a camera, and a new sign. I installed it just outside the gravel lane they'd bulldozed onto my land. Nothing aggressive. Just a plain wooden board with black letters burned into it by hand. Private property. Not for sale, not for lease, not yours. Let's see if that popped up in their next brochure. I knew what was coming next. It was only a matter of time. The paint was dry, the windows installed, and the lies laminated. They thought I hadn't noticed, that I'd just roll over, let them settle in, because when I was ready, there wouldn't be a pebble left on that dirt that didn't belong to me. It was still dark when the machines rolled in. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, though I won't lie, the timing was satisfying, but because I wanted it done before the subdivision's morning dog walkers came out in their pastel tracksuits and started filming with their phones. I'd given the crew strict instructions. Sunrise start, no warnings, no delays, full teardown. 3 flatbeds, 2 backhoes, 1 big yellow bulldozer with fresh treads, and a driver named Carl who looked like he'd bulldozed a few things just for fun in his younger days. They rumbled down the pasture road like a mechanized wake-up call from hell itself. In the lead truck was a storage container, already labeled Non-Permitted Debris, Golden Mesa Village, South Extension. By 6:05, the first house was already losing its roof. I watched from the ridge with my coffee in hand and a pair of binoculars around my neck. No yelling, no resistance, just the metallic scream of screws tearing from wood and the satisfying crunch of vinyl siding folding like paper. Carl, bless him, took his time with the center structure, using the blade to pop it sideways before driving through the frame with the kind of precision you don't learn in school. The porch railing snapped in two. A plastic garden gnome, a recent addition, went flying into the weeds like a little red-hatted missile. By 7, the plumbing was out of the ground. By 8, the slabs were cracked. By 9:30, all 3 houses were just memories, reduced to neat piles of splintered lumber and mangled wire waiting to be loaded up. The welcome mats, the patio chairs, the fake little Live, Laugh, Love sign someone had hung in one of the windows, gone. In their place, fresh tire tracks, a cleared site, and silence. And at exactly 10 minutes past 10, she arrived. Karen's BMW took the turn too fast, kicking up dust as it veered off the HOA road and bounced onto the gravel. She screeched to a halt, just shy of the demolition site, flung the door open, and stormed out in heels and a cardigan like she was about to file a lawsuit with the power of her glare alone. "What have you done?" I didn't say anything at first, just sipped my coffee. These were part of a municipal initiative. This was approved development, community housing for transitional buyers. "On my land?" I asked. She froze, the gears in her head grinding. "I have permits." "No, Karen. You have dreams. You have lies. You have a glossy flyer that calls my land Phase 2 of your HOA's vanity project. But what you don't have is ownership. And what you built? That was theft." "You can't just tear down homes," she shrieked, voice cracking. "There were buyers. Deposits, contracts. Then you should call them," I said. "And apologize." She actually trembled. Not with fear, Karen didn't do fear, but with the kind of righteous rage only people like her could muster. She pointed a manicured finger at me. "You'll regret this. You just destroyed residential property. That's destruction of private assets. I'm calling the sheriff." I pulled a folder from the front seat of my truck and handed it to her. Inside were aerial images, drone timestamps, parcel maps, notarized declarations, legal affidavits, a certified demolition plan, and a letter from Sandra Martinez clearly outlining that the structures were unpermitted, illegally constructed, and situated wholly on land I owned free and clear. She stared at the paperwork, lips twitching. "Those permits don't exist." They said, "Who? Your imaginary city planner, the guy you keep quoting in emails who never actually signs anything? The one from Community Integration Services that doesn't show up in any registry?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Behind us, the crew started loading debris into the dump trailers. It was a hell of a sound. Metal on metal, wood cracking, the thunk of ruined drywall hitting steel. Final punctuation marks on her fantasy. "I'll sue," she whispered. I smiled. "You can try." She stood there for another minute, like she was waiting for something divine to happen. Maybe the clouds to part, maybe a camera crew to appear, maybe a last-minute miracle, but none came. Just Carl in the bulldozer, chewing a toothpick and revving the engine like he wanted to finish early. Karen turned, climbed back into her BMW, and slammed the door hard enough to make her sunglasses jump off the dashboard. The car peeled out, fishtailed, and disappeared into the subdivision. By 11:30, the last nail was swept, the soil smoothed. And at the site of the former center cabin, I posted one more sign, short, sweet, and visible from the HOA walking path. "This is still my land. Build elsewhere." I took a photo of it, sent it to Sandra. Her reply was one word: perfect. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days after the demolition, I got served. A knock at the door just after lunch. Plain white pickup out front. Guy in khakis and aviators holding a manila envelope like it was radioactive. "Are you Mr. Grayson Crowell?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I nodded. He handed me the packet, gave a tight nod, and walked off without another word. Inside, the lawsuit. Karen Bloom v. Grayson Crowell. Filed in district court, signed off by a lawyer I didn't recognize. Someone out of Tulsa who clearly didn't understand what he'd gotten himself into. The claim: unlawful destruction of private residential property, reckless endangerment, intentional interference with contractual agreements, and, my personal favorite, emotional trauma stemming from the aggressive dismantling of community infrastructure. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the folder. Sandra didn't laugh. She read the whole complaint with her mouth in a thin professional line, flipping pages with the precision of someone mentally loading rounds into a chamber. "Okay," she said finally, "time to break her spine." I met her the next morning at the county records office. We requested a certified property survey again, then pulled the GPS-tagged drone footage, dated field cam images, and the full sequence of Karen's flyers and promotional materials. Sandra also filed a countersuit: unlawful encroachment, property fraud, and civil trespass with intent to develop. She smiled as she stapled it all together. If her lawyer's got half a brain, he'll drop it by Thursday. But Karen didn't drop it. She doubled down. The local paper ran a column, clearly spoon-fed by someone from the HOA, about rural hostility toward growth and generational landowners blocking progress. Karen gave an interview, standing next to the bare dirt where her cabins had once been, telling the reporter that her initiative was about community, about belonging, and that she'd been blindsided by an outdated attitude of ownership. She even threw in a quote about the moral duty to house people. I nearly choked on my coffee. See, the problem with building your case on lies is that reality has a nasty habit of punching through, and by the time the first court date rolled around, I had a 50-page binder that punched like a freight train. In the courtroom, Karen looked like she was attending a fashion show. High heels, power suit, manicured to the moon. Her lawyer looked 10 years younger than her, and about as confident as a wet sponge. Sandra and I sat quietly at our table while the judge flipped through our evidence packet. His eyebrows started climbing around page 7. "Let me get this straight," the judge said, peering over his glasses. "You constructed 3 residential structures on land you did not own, without permits, and then attempted to sell them." Karen opened her mouth, but her lawyer raised a hand. "Your Honor, my client was led to believe—" The judge didn't even blink. "By whom?" Silence. I could feel Karen vibrating with rage next to her lawyer, like a pot about to boil over. She was waiting for her miracle again. But this wasn't some HOA board meeting where she could steamroll retirees and collect applause. This was court, and courts tend to prefer facts. We presented satellite images, timestamps, the original property deed, 3 notarized witness statements, thanks Bobby, and Sandra's piece de resistance, an internal HOA email that had somehow been forwarded to our office, in which Karen referred to the construction site as our shadow build. "He's too old to patrol that far south anyway." Karen turned crimson when that one was read aloud. The judge called a recess. During the break, I stepped outside and found Karen pacing by the vending machines, muttering into her phone. She noticed me, hung up, and stormed over. "You're not going to win," she hissed. "You think this is over, but I have connections. I have people who want this expansion. You're a fossil sitting on a gold mine you don't even use." "Karen," I said, "you committed fraud. You forged a development map, trespassed, built homes you didn't own, sold them under false pretenses, and now you're trying to sue me for cleaning up your mess." "I had permits." "No, you had printouts. From a fake entity." "You'll regret this." I looked her square in the eye. "You already do." She tried to speak, but the bailiff called us back in. The judge returned, took his seat, and said flatly, "This court finds in favor of the defendant." Additionally, the plaintiff is referred to the district attorney for possible investigation regarding land fraud, forgery of public documents, and attempted real estate misrepresentation. Karen blinked. Her lawyer's shoulders slumped. Sandra smiled. I didn't. Not yet, because something in Karen's eyes told me she still had a card up her sleeve. And if I knew anything about snakes like her, it was this. They don't stop slithering just because you step on their tail. I thought the courtroom would be the end of it. I was wrong. The week after the verdict, the air got strange. Not dramatic, just off. My usual delivery from Midwest Feed came late. Driver said someone flagged the route as unapproved for commercial access and rerouted him 3 towns over. A random inspection from the county's environmental division showed up, citing anonymous complaints about pesticide storage. Then 3 separate utility trucks knocked on my gate on 3 different days, each claiming there was a work order for infrastructure upgrades across the southern pasture. Southern pasture. You know, the one where the cabins used to be. Someone was still playing chess. And losing. I called Sandra. She wasn't surprised. They're trying to build a pattern, she said. Or at least suggest a pattern, make it look like your land has issues. Keep you tangled in inspections, disruptions, noise. Classic post-litigation pressure campaign. Petty, but annoying. Can we prove it's her? Not easily. But give me time. In the meantime, I doubled down on my patrols. I started walking the perimeter twice daily, sunrise and sunset, just me and my boots, and the sound of insects in the fence grass. I checked every gate, photographed every fresh tire track. Bobby rigged a couple of new trail cams, ones that looked like birdhouses but could catch a squirrel blinking at 100 feet. Then came the break-in. It was subtle. A chain cut clean on the western gate. No sign of vehicles, no major damage, but someone had trespassed. Left a cigarette butt near the property line and a torn piece of laminated paper, half of a sign that read, "Welcome Future Residents." I turned it over. HOA logo. The nerve of this woman. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. Instead, I played it her way. I went quiet. The next morning, I called Earl, contractor, part-time welder, full-time problem solver. We spent the afternoon putting up a new set of gates. Not the old steel ones, but 8-foot iron beasts anchored in concrete with motion sensors and solar floodlights on top. Karen wanted to escalate? Fine. I was done being polite. I sent a single email to the HOA board. Not Karen, but the board. Subject line, final warning. To whom it may concern, continued interference with my property, including but not limited to unauthorized access, false reports to county agencies, and harassment of vendors, will result in criminal charges and federal filings. You lost. Act like it. Regards, GC. 3 hours later, a black SUV showed up at the end of my drive. Not Karen's usual BMW. This one had government plates. 2 men in dress shirts stepped out, one carrying a clipboard. Federal Housing Oversight. Apparently, someone filed a complaint alleging I had illegally displaced low-income housing, claimed I'd demolished active dwellings, said it may constitute a violation of federal fair housing law. They were polite, curious, asked if I'd be willing to talk. I didn't slam the door on them. I had nothing to hide. We sat on the porch while I laid it all out. Ownership documents, court transcripts, demolition permits, maps, images, receipts. I walked them down to the south pasture, pointed out the survey markers, showed them where the illegal builds had been, explained how they were never permitted, never occupied, never legally recorded. One of the agents, a younger guy with tired eyes, flipped through my paperwork and nodded slowly. This looks clean. Might have been flagged by a disgruntled applicant or organization. Happens sometimes after civil disputes. Can I guess who? I asked. He didn't smile, but his silence said enough. They left after about 40 minutes. No threats, no warnings, just a thin smile and a thank you for your cooperation. I shook their hands. I kept calm, but the moment they pulled away, I felt the fire rise in my chest. This wasn't about housing. This wasn't about rules. This was about Karen trying to win a war she'd already lost. That night, I went digging. Not in the field, online. Karen's HOA wasn't just a group of retirees keeping lawns tidy. It was incorporated under a shell company, Golden Mesa Development Holdings. And guess who was listed as treasurer? Her cousin, a real estate broker who'd been fined twice for fraudulent listings. The deeper I dug, the more rot I found. Missing HOA funds, suspicious construction invoices, dozens of homes with pending titles that didn't line up with county records. One flagged entry showed HOA funds used for a consultation with an architecture firm that didn't exist. Sandra's response when I sent her the files. Oh, sweet mercy. We've got her. The next morning, Sandra filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office. fraud, misuse of homeowner funds, misrepresentation, and worst of all, real estate conspiracy on federally monitored lands. By noon, Karen's HOA was no longer Karen's HOA. She'd been suspended pending investigation, and now it was only a matter of time before the dirt she built on swallowed her whole. The day the arrests began was surprisingly quiet. I just finished mucking out the horse stalls when my phone buzzed. Sandra, no greeting, just a short line that hit harder than any gavel. Turn on local news. Channel 4. I wiped my hands on my jeans and flicked on the old TV mounted in the barn. The reporter stood outside the Golden Mesa HOA clubhouse, mic in hand, eyes gleaming like she'd waited her whole career for this. Behind her, a stream of county deputies and state investigators poured in and out of the building, some carrying boxes, others leading confused board members out in cuffs. And then the camera zoomed in on Karen. She wasn't screaming this time. No dramatic speeches, no haughty posturing, just wide eyes, lips drawn tight, hands cuffed behind her back as she was led toward the waiting cruiser. One deputy put a hand on her head as they guided her in. Routine maybe, but still humiliating. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The charges? A list longer than a feed bill, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, misuse of HOA funds, document forgery, and obstruction of federal inquiry. And the kicker? The affordable housing initiative she used to justify the builds on my land. Turns out it was nothing but a front. Fake contracts, phantom buyers, inflated invoices. Her cousin the broker was arrested 2 counties over the same morning. So was the so-called city planner from Community Integration Services. Every lie she told had come back with teeth. I didn't go down to watch it unfold. No need to. The pasture was quiet, and the south gate, now properly sealed and monitored, stayed undisturbed. Instead, I took a folding chair out there, right where the cabins used to stand, and sat with a sandwich and a thermos of iced tea, watching the breeze roll over the flattened land. Later that week, Sandra forwarded the final court notice. Karen Bloom sentenced to 4 years in state prison, with additional restitution to the homeowners who'd been duped by her subdivision scams. Her assets frozen. Her HOA dissolved. The board disbanded, accounts audited, every contract revoked or re-examined. It was over, but I wasn't done. 2 weeks later, I met with the local farming co-op, a group of younger ranchers and smallholders looking for a place to expand. Good people. One of them, a single mother raising goats and barley, had been kicked out of Golden Mesa for painting her barn the wrong shade of red. They pooled their funds and offered me a decent price for the southern tract. I sold it to them for $1, with one condition written in bold on the deed transfer: no HOA, ever. They agreed. I helped them stake the new boundary, install a fresh entrance, and plant a big wooden sign at the edge of the property. I even carved the message myself. This land stays free. A few months passed. The co-op flourished. The pasture grew quiet again. Bobby came by with a cooler of beers one afternoon and grinned at the ridge. You ever think you'd have to fight a suburban war on your own land? I sipped my drink and shrugged. Didn't think I'd win it this easily. He laughed. We sat there in silence a while, listening to the wind. Later that evening, I uploaded a new video to my YouTube channel, Landline, Tales from the Boundary. Just me in a flannel, sitting on a stump, telling the story of how a woman in heels tried to annex a piece of my farm without asking and ended up losing everything. The title? Karen built houses on my land, so I flattened them. The thumbnail? That sign I posted after the demolition, weathered now, but still standing. Please build in your own sandbox. The comments came fast. Some cheered, some asked for legal advice. One guy wanted to send me whiskey, another offered to make a t-shirt. A week later, the video hit 500,000 views. I never planned on becoming a folk hero, but if there's one thing I've learned out here, it's this. You don't mess with an old engineer's land, especially not the corners he walks twice a day, rain or shine.